Hi, welcome to the Diablo Podcast. We are online at diablopodcast.com, and this is a service of diabloinkgamers.com. I am your host, Flux. I am joined this week by Xanth and Sarnakle, who I'm going to mispronounce all night. It's spelled like it rhymes with barnacle, but it's not.
It is pronounced Sarnakle.
And you mentioned that you got the name from a character in Chris Mark's Demon's Bane.
That is correct. For some reason, I just really enjoy that book, even though it's one of the very shorter ones. Just a quick, nice, easy read, and I've always liked that character. I also believe he's in the Sin Wars, one of the Sin War books, for a brief period, or mentioned in it at least.
And the irony is that Chris Marks named that character after a friend of his who was his old play buddy who played a wizard when they played Diablo 1. That's where he got the name from. And so now it's spread into you. Do you use that for any of your characters in game?
Actually, yes. My current barb is named Sarnakle.
So see, it's going round and round, like the circle of life. The Sarnakle of life. So we are covering the Barbarian this week. You guys are both hardcore Barbarian fans. It's worked out kind of ironically. There are other guests who are going to be potentially on the show who were not hardcore, and the timing didn't work out. So you two are hardcore. And I am not hardcore, but I'm not much of a Barbarian fan either, although I have a level 60. And so we're going to talk about basic stuff about the character, the sort of the Inferno build stuff, suggestions for improvement, PvP in the future, what you guys have been doing, etc. And all Barbarian skills, builds, equipment, all kinds of cool stuff. And we'll start off with what you guys have been doing. Why don't you go first, Sarnakle, since you're a little less than level 60. What have you done with the Barbarian, and why do you like the character?
Well, I've created so far 3 Barbarians. I got my first one up to level 53, and then I was killed. I was killed because I didn't realize that Wrath of the Berserker breaks CC, and I just got CC feared in hell and died because of those arcane torrents. Had a second character die at level 30 because of a group thing, everybody scattered, and then I was killed. And now I'm on my 3rd Barbarian, level 30. I enjoy the class. I think it's by far the most fun as far as combat goes. You don't just kite around. You're actually in there in the combat, and you don't feel like... The monk just doesn't have that power, that the Barbarian has, like when you cleave and everything explodes and body parts go flying. That is pretty much why I enjoy the Barbarian over all the other classes.
How about you, Zane?
I've had 2 Barbarians. First one made it to 60, was in Inferno. And just, for the sake of comedy, I'll share his death. So right as the God mode Barbarian bug was happening and I had reported on it for the site, I decided to do a little testing myself. I jumped into Hell, dashed into Gome, and it worked really well. And I thought, you know what? That's Hell, and I've already passed Hell, so why not try that on Inferno? The character was geared for Act 1 Inferno, not Act 3 Inferno, and ended up dying very shortly. Great learning experience. Had a lot of fun doing it. But, I will share that sometimes exploits don't work out. Currently, my Barbarian is sitting at level 51. And I'll agree with Sarnakle. It is one of those, in terms of combat, it's a very fun class. I think you can jump into any act, and you just go up and you just club something, you see it go exploding, and that's really fun about this class in particular. It's always been the class that I've always had on the back burner. It's something that I always return to whenever whatever class I happen to be playing gets a little tedious, because I know I'm going to have a good time when I play a Barbarian. It's not the one that I'll pick up all the time, but it's always the one I go back to.
And your previous hardcore, Xanth, you did a Witch Doctor and a Monk, both to level 60, and they both have a passive skill that enables you to cheat death if really bad things happen. Barbarian does not, although I guess you could say maybe Wrath of the Berserker is kind of like that. Did you have any really close calls? Were you able to survive because of a specific
I think it
skill?
was always knowledge going in. Because the Barbarian was not my first class that I got to 60, I kind of knew what I was getting into. I knew if I was going into, an arcane pack that I needed something, or a Waller pack, I needed something that would get me out of there, so I was always planning for it. something like leap, that's really simple and I can just kind of get out of the way. So I would always have at least one skill on my bar and usually two, that could get me out of trouble or at least absorb damage. That was just kind of my play style. So I didn't really have that many really close calls, but it is a completely different mindset for a hardcore with a barbarian than, a monk or a witch doctor, where you have that kind of safety net. Like even right now with my witch doctor, I know as I'm running through, I'm a little less cautious that if something happens, I'm going to end up being okay. And I can kind of get out of there. Whereas barbarian, I don't have that option. If that health bar goes to 0, I'm dead.
And you take a lot of damage with a barb, and it's a very high-risk, kind of high-reward character, it seems like, than when I watch people play really high-level Inferno stuff, where you're dealing out massive, huge damage to everything in sight, and you're also taking massive, huge damage, and if you have one little problem or your life on hit doesn't work or you whiff or something, it's like very bad. Rubber banding and you're dead.
Right, but I think that's also the appeal, too, and I think that's what makes, the Barbarian a really cool class to play, because, you can jump in, you can do a huge amount of damage, but you don't necessarily feel invincible, and I don't know, I guess that's kind of the appeal for me. You can just clear a room, but also be on the edge of death, and I guess maybe I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie.
Well, if you play hardcore, I guess you're supposed to be an adrenaline junkie. Have either of you guys tried a non-hardcore barb, or you're both all
Never
there?
played a non-hardcore barb.
Yeah, only pussies do that. Who cares? So how are you guys on multiplayer or solo? You said you had one of your deaths, Sarnakle, because other people got out of the way and it was their fault. Have you played mostly solo with the barb, or are you pairing up some?
I like to pair up a lot. I open my game up to the public almost all the time. I've had a lot of success also, despite the fact that there's a low amount of people playing hardcore, with getting 4 people in a game. I just had a bad luck instance where people weren't playing as a group. They were just kind of running all over the place and dragging champion packs all over, just monsters and mayhem everywhere. So
like Diablo
except
2,
for I never played hardcore in Diablo 2, so it wasn't an issue there. But yeah, I think it's way more fun. That's how Diablo's supposed to be played, is as a multiplayer game, not as a solo game, and that's how I play it. Once I get up to Inferno, if I ever get there, maybe play with some other people that I know are very well and are very tactical and that I can communicate with even through like Skype or something, but I will probably do a lot of soloing on Inferno.
You said you're doing some of the Whirlwind Sprint build, Xanth, with your barb, at least you were. From what I've seen, that build is not very effective in multiplayer because you want all the monsters clustered up so your little tornadoes can shoot through them all.
I think that's where that whole solo versus multiplayer aspect really comes in, and, sometimes your builds end up changing depending on what you want to do. When I was running a Whirlwind Barb, and I'll agree with you, Flux, it was so much easier to do it on a single player because I knew what I was doing, I knew where I was going, I knew where I wanted things to go, and you toss another person into that mix, and then things don't go right, and then if something doesn't go right, then your build's not working, and then possibly you're dying. But I mean, from 1 to 59, though, with that Barbarian, and even with my current one, completely fine jumping into a public game because that build's not set. It's not right. It's not working just yet. So, in general, I'm completely happy, and I'll agree with Sarnakle that, public games are great, from 1 to 59, and I prefer it. It's just after 60 that they just kind of become lackluster.
But we've had discussions about what they could do to improve multiplayer. In Diablo 2, of course, you got many more experience points, which actually mattered because you weren't max level so quickly, and you got a lot more item drops. And both those things are not in Diablo 3. They took out ninja looting and they took out non-consensual PvP and such, but they didn't really add anything, So it seems like there's no real incentive to play multiplayer unless it's more fun.
If anything, it's more difficult. I know they've decreased damage, but health scales by 115%. So for each person, monsters are going up 115%, and if I'm sitting there doing, we'll say hypothetically 17,000 damage, and the person next to me is doing 10, that monster is going to take a lot longer to kill, and now I'm going slower. So, what could be done? Maybe even drop it down to a base 100%, maybe an increase to damage for everybody. Maybe you go in and you tweak a couple of skills so that you can actually buff the people you're with. I mean, you want to really make it a group-oriented game. I feel like when I go into a game now, I'm not like, yes, a barbarian entered because they can buff me, or, a witch doctor entered and they'll have somebody to take some damage for me. I'm just like, okay, another person. Now it's going to be more difficult. Thanks for showing.
Yeah, and of course, Diablo 2 is just, as you just mentioned, when a barbarian joined your game, you were like, awesome, battle order.
Or if you were with Oak Sage or anything like that. Those were great,
yeah.
And it was always kind of cool. Like when you'd show up and you'd be the lone druid, and people would be like, awesome, so glad you're here. Like I've got so much, or like they'd, in text they would type out how much health they had now thanks to you. It's all just kind of EP and stroking in some respect, but it was the feel of need. I don't need any of those other people, and that's kind of sad.
Or paladins with fanaticism, or necromancers with curses that benefited everybody. It seems like most of there are auras, obviously, that share somewhat, and some of the rune effects share, but it seems like we don't have the sort of... When you debuff monsters, like, it's only for you, Or when you buff yourself, it's mostly for you. You don't have, like, the witch doctor kind of thing, where everybody can now get 100% more damage.
And then, like, that monk that shows up, they have a build that's working for them, and then all of a sudden you say, like, hey, it'd be great if we could get, a different mantra here, and they'd be like, no, thanks, I don't want to do that. That would mess me up. So there's no need to help out anybody else.
I've actually found that not to be an issue, and of course I'm not playing Inferno, but when I grew up, when I did have my first monk, I got into a game with 3 other monks, and for the most part, we all worked together and switched around our mantras. Now that could just be a fluke instead of...
I think in that case, obviously you're working with a couple monks, that makes sense, but for the lone monk that joins a 4-player group.
Yeah, that's true.
They might be a little more hesitant to be like, you know what, I've been using Mantra of Evasion, I like it, I'm not going to switch to something because you don't have enough resists. And I feel like that's the wrong mentality. Where people look at each other and like, well, you're not carrying your weight and I don't want to help you. In some respects we have to work with each other.
Yeah, and I don't think even if they tripled the item drops, that it would make a difference that on Inferno, at least hardcore, you wouldn't risk grouping up with people that you don't know, because they, like you said, they might not have enough DPS or carry their own weight. They might get you killed.
Right.
Especially hardcore.
I know in WoW, and I hate to reference that game, but one of the big things they did to encourage people to go and play with others, and that they didn't know, is when they entered into a game, they buffed the whole party. It would be, I think it was, an experience increase, and then a little more damage, a little more health for everybody in the party. Now, does it have to go to those kind of extremes? Maybe not, but it happened for each character that joined. So if you grouped up with one other random person, then you got, 5%, or whatever it happened to be. And then after, you had a full party, it was something like 25. I feel like something like that, and like I said, I hate to really incorporate more stuff into it, but something like that would kind of encourage people, and maybe you don't have to do the experience, but maybe it's a little more magic find, or gold find, or whatever it happens to be, to get people to really say, you know what, now it's worth it for me to show up in this game, as opposed to just doing this by myself.
One of the suggestions I thought was pretty good was adding higher stacks of Nephilim Valor with more people. So you can go up to, 6, 8, 10 stacks with 2, 3, 4 people, something like that. Of course, that wouldn't help with your whole switch your skills to something that'll help me, because then, I'm not switching skills. I got 8 stacks right now.
True.
But that just leverages an existing game feature to potentially add bonuses for multiplayer without making the difficulty changes or hit point changes or anything. In other words, it's quick, easy, and cheap. And even the absentee Diablo III developers might, take 5 minutes from their coffee break to do that, right? Not that I'm bitter or anything. So, what do you guys build? Let's just briefly, we're going to get into more details about builds and Inferno stuff and skills later on, but I guess for building up through the levels, you guys are kind of doing the sword and board thing since you don't want to die.
Definitely doing that.
So weapon and a shield, basically.
My second barbarian was dual wield. I did not have a shield, and I think that played a part into why I died so quickly. So I think it's essential almost to have a shield if you have a barbarian at any level other than up to 10. A couple of builds that I use, especially in about mid-range, I use Furious Charge. I found if you use Furious Charge with Merciless Assault, and then there's that Sprint Run Like the Wind, I think it is, where that gives you the tornadoes.
Yeah.
That's really, really effective because the Merciless Assault reduces your cooldown by 2 seconds for every enemy you hit to just group them up, get them in a big, basically herd them up, and then just sprint back and forth, or Furious Charge back and forth in between them. You just completely wipe out your cooldown, and you're hitting them for 200% almost weapon damage, and you can just destroy that group, and you get health orbs. So that's almost a staple in my build once I get to about level 30 something. I think it's 33 that you get that rune. Furious Charge generates fury, so
that counteracts the cost
correct.
Of the sprint.
And the sprint lasts for 4 seconds, and by you've generated 60. Actually, you probably generated about 100 fury by the time you need to re-sprint because it's just constant back and forth, back and forth.
Assuming you have at least 5 targets.
Yeah, and then by that point, then you just go and beat them up with your cleave or frenzy. Also, I do not like frenzy. It seems like everybody requires frenzy as part of their build. Unless I'm doing just a single target, I prefer cleave with Rapture or Broad Sweep, one of the two. I don't know if... It seems like every build I read always requires frenzy with sidearm or with Massacre, or Maniac, that's what it is, where it increases your damage.
It's funny because none of the frenzy runes are really that good. I mean, the sidearm's kind of cool, but none of them really make you... I mean, none of them do as much as frenzy did just as the base skill in Diablo II, which added your speed and added damage to everything. Whereas you can either just add damage or speed or throw little spears off, throw little axes off.
With that being said, I do have one exception. Smite is very, very useful against single targets like bosses, because you're attacking them so fast and you hit them for a 20% chance to stun them for 1.5 seconds. Nightmare Diablo, that's when I first got that rune. With my first barbarian, I just stun-locked him the entire fight. It was no challenge. I never even dropped below 75 health, ever.
Any mid-level skills and runes you're fond of, Xanth?
I would disagree. I kind of do like Frenzy, and I know, obviously, a little point of dissension. I do like the attack speed. I like sidearm, too, for leveling. I will agree, Furious Charge, definitely awesome. Toss in Dreadnought, and then, you're getting 8% of your maximum life back, which I found for hardcore extremely helpful, trying to kind of just throw on as many different skills or runes on those skills that are going to give me back life. I was also a big fan of Revenge, too. When it procs, it just felt like I was wiping out everything. And then
I assume that was mandatory for any hardcore barbarian.
Great damage, and then obviously life back, too, which was insanely helpful.
Do you use the rune that increases the percent chance to 30?
Definitely. Was that?
I think that's the default in Revenge. Even softcore, because if you're going to use it, you might as well double the chance of being able to use it. For people who haven't played Revenge, it's kind of weird because it only triggers when you get hit. There's a percent chance. What is that?
Right,
15% at base.
With the rune, it's 30.
And once you get hit, 15% chance, the skill will light up and you can hit it. And he does a big 360-degree spin, which hits everything for big damage and big heal, and also has a smashing.
Yeah, 220% damage, and you heal 5% of your life.
Per monster hit.
Per monster hit, and then you combine that with Dreadnought, which is 8% of your life for each target hit, and you've got a decent amount of life coming in. And I've always found with the Barbarian that was the big deal is. Yeah, you go in and you're hitting a whole bunch of stuff, but you're also taking a lot of damage. So what are you doing to counteract the amount of life that you're losing? It's not like a monk where you have a heal, or the Witch Doctor where you can kind of spirit walk out and you're getting healed at the same time. You need life coming in as you're doing damage, simultaneously.
And kind of the most conservative Barb build that I've seen is where you just have Frenzy and Revenge as your only 2 attack skills. And everything else is a debuff or a shout or something. And you can just grind away on one target with Frenzy, and every time Revenge triggers, you hit that, and that's your AoE. And you can just, use 2 skills, really just using 1 skill and Revenge all the time. And that gets kind of boring, it's more fun to get in Seismic Slam or, Furious Charge or something. But you can do it just with this very grinding sort of, it's almost like a Zeal Paladin kind of thing from Diablo 2.
That's why I don't like the skill, is I just don't, it's just boring.
I definitely say, like, during those mid-levels, I always struggled with a Fury spender as to which one I wanted to go with. I could never, pin down which one I liked. I mean, Whirlwind was fun just because, it's nostalgic and stuff like that, but it never seemed as effective as anything. Seismic Slam was cool. I liked seeing everything go, exploding everywhere. But I was always second-guessing what I wanted.
And Rend is pretty functional, but it's boring again. It's like Revenge's ugly sister.
Another little spin, and then you just keep going. And then Hammer of the Ancients and stuff like that. It just, nothing ever seemed right. I mean, once you get to 60, I feel like you have a little more diversity in terms of your choice, and Whirlwind actually can be effective. And I think that was my favorite part of the fact that this Whirlwind build came together, was now Whirlwind had a place. It actually made sense, as opposed to just kind of being a skill that was great to see back, but nobody would use.
Because the Fury cost is so high, until people found these cool builds, and other synergies and stuff, it became full-time forever. And now you can, and same thing has happened with Wrath of the Berserker, so. But we'll get to that in a minute. So, speaking of Wrath of the Berserker, is that mandatory for hardcore? I mean, it breaks, huge bonuses to everything.
CC.
It breaks CC effects. You can't be frozen, etc.
I personally think it is. If you look at a couple of those big spenders, you have Earthquake, you have Call of the Ancients, and you have Wrath of the Berserker. I feel like Wrath of the Berserker, out of all of them, is pretty much the best. Breaking CC, which is huge, especially in hardcore, where you can't necessarily afford to be pinned down like that. And then just the damage increase and everything else. And it looks cool. So, I mean, that's, if you're choosing skills purely based on looks, Wrath of the Berserker.
That's the Jay Wilson plan.
I disagree. I don't think it's necessarily, if you were playing softcore, I don't think it would be a necessary skill. I think that Earthquake could be substituted. That was also before I knew that you could break CC with it, but I played a long time with my first Barb and never ever used it until I got CC locked, or Fear locked, and then died, and had I known that I could break it with Wrath. But if I had the luxury of being able to be revived in softcore, I would have been able to go back there and either kill him or run away for that pack, and I don't think it's necessarily mandatory.
Well, there's builds that don't use it, obviously, but it's so useful for boss killing. I mean, my Barb was a little under-geared, like going through Nightmare in Hell. And I could do okay on regular packs, and then I would get to bosses and champions, and it was like, oh god. It just was really slow. And then you pop Wrath of the Berserker, and you've got 10% critical hit chance, 25% attack speed, 20% dodge chance, 20% movement speed, and you can add 100% damage with the rune, which is a fairly low level. Yeah, Insanity is what level? It's in the 30s,
40.
I think. 40, yeah. But obviously by Nightmare in Hell you've got it though. And it was like, this is the button I press when there's a boss to kill. The rest of the time you can kind of grind along. But a little bit about Barbarian basics. I know we've jumped 20 minutes into the show. People who don't know what we're talking about yet.
It's okay.
So the class, no, that never works. The class basically the Barbarian has Fury, which builds up, especially from hitting stuff. And you can generate Fury from killing destructibles as well as monsters, which seemed like a really big deal in the beta. But then it means absolutely nothing in the full game. I mean, have you ever noticed, like, past level 30, ooh, I hit a barrel and gained Fury,
No.
I mean, early on, it's like, it's fun. Like, you mentioned Furious Charge, where you can actually charge through, like, 5 barrels, and that resets the entire charge time. And gains Fury. So it's really fun, like, early in Act 1. You're like, hey, barrels, wham, oh, full, I'm charged up again. But that was kind of a thing we all noticed in the beta because there's, Act 1 is mainly infested by barrels. That's the largest predator of the Tristram, it seems like. The crates and crap to break, yeah. The urns. And then you get into later acts and it's like, name a destructible in Act 3.
Well, there's...
bones.
Exactly. Railings.
There's all those carts and everything in the battlefield you can destroy.
Yeah, in the keep you get a lot of crap in some of the corners of it. But, it just compared to Act 1, it seems like there's such a major factor. And, of course, Act 4's got the glowing blue urns that never drop a goddamn thing. Just ignore them. But anyway, so the basic... A new Barb, you're either using Bash, Cleave, or Frenzy, and as you hit stuff, you gain Fury, and then you try to find something to use the Fury on, but there aren't a lot of great options early on, as Xanth was just saying. And you said you liked Cleave best, Sarnakle. Yes. Everyone loves the Rupture one. It's the first rune effect you get, and when you kill things, you can hit like 5 things at a time, and the ones that die explode in blood and gore.
Right.
What's not to like, right?
I think from playing the beta, I would just log in eventually after a certain point and just rupture things. I didn't have any other reason to be logging in, but it was just fun. And I think
Did you guys ever use Bash? Does anyone like Bash? Single target, knockback?
Bosses, toss on, Clobber. Especially in those early levels, and then, as Sarnakle was saying, being able to stun lock a boss, especially if you have another Barbarian in the group too. I found that to be helpful, but I think outside of that particular usage, I almost never use it.
No, I've never used it beyond the Skeleton King.
Yeah, I've never used it even that far, I don't think. Because even the Skeleton King, you want to get Cleave so you can take out his little minion.
I've used it in a Whirlwind build just for the being able to generate additional Fury with Instigation, because you get 6 more Fury per attack. But
so that's 12 Fury per hit, and you can easily do 2 hits per second if you have a quick equipment.
So, it's not completely useless, but you really do feel like after those first couple levels that you kind of never want to go back to it.
It's so much fun to hit lots of things at once.
And especially when you get Rupture so early on, it makes Bash look like crap.
Yeah, and I don't know why you would use Bash instead of Frenzy if you were going to just single target something. Why would you not increase your attack speed by 75%? Even if you can stun lock them occasionally, you just do so much more damage with Frenzy.
So Bash does 150% base damage, and Frenzy does 110%. But if you're hitting 50% faster,
75%
that's not going to really make a difference. Yeah.
So.
And there's the one. Have you ever tried using the Bash rune that gives you that doubles the Fury? So you're getting 12 per hit. And in theory, could you pair that if you were going the lowest rent possible Wrath of the Berserker? Of course, the rune for that is level 60, I think, or 59. That adds to the duration when you gain 25. Every 25 Fury, you gain 1 second duration.
60.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing that, and you're gaining 12 Fury for every hit of Bash. You're doing 2 bashes a second. So you can pretty much tread water almost indefinitely. Of course, there's about 1,000 better options than this.
But
could you use that like on Diablo in Inferno, just to tank away and never lose your Wrath of the Berserker?
And then you double it up with a couple other, Fury generating skills, and you could ride it out for quite a while.
So you want Fury, and you use those skills, and then as you start leveling up a little more, you start to get. We kind of mentioned the alternate skills. You build those are just building Fury forever, and you can pretty much live with nothing but that if you want to. You really don't even need to spend Fury that much.
I've had several builds where I don't have a single Fury spender. And
there is a passive, right, that increases your damage when your Fury is full?
Berserker Rage. It increases your damage by 25%.
There's an achievement, right? Like if you have 5 minutes of full Fury, you get an achievement. I think I got that one time. In theory, it's more efficient to use Fury spenders because they, kill stuff. So we kind of mentioned Rend. Seismic Slam's a lot of fun. And it's big visual. You smash the ground and this shockwave goes out and it can knock stuff back and stun stuff and deal lots of AoE damage. Either of you guys have a big fetish for Seismic Slam?
I really liked it in the beta because it was the last skill you got. So it was fun to play with. I don't know. I guess once I got a chance to use it and to rune it out a little bit, there was nothing that really kept my attention. I think after using it a couple times, you see him go flying back. You get the beautiful visual. But after that, I don't know. As I said before, I always struggled with what do I want to spend my Fury on? It never felt like anything was truly effective.
I completely agree with Xanth. I've used it pretty extensively, and you just, after a while, it's just like, I don't know, there's just better things you can be spending your Fury on, and I think it's mostly just for the visual effects. That just looks really cool. And
well, you like Cleave Rupture just for that,
true.
So why not?
It just feels so right to be destroying everything like that with a big, massive Barbarian.
I found Seismic Slam really useful when I was first into Hell with my Barb, and he was weak and undergeared. And I really needed something to knock back and spread out monsters and stun them, and it was nice to hit like 5 things at once. So I get like a group of champions, and you could just pound one of those, and you could chop them a few times and get your Fury back for it pretty quickly. And you can put one of the rune effects, I think, that increases the chance of stun. I really should be looking at this while I say it, but that's my recollection of it anyway. So it's pretty good defensive skill. The one that I've seen mentioned people trying to use late game is Rumble, which adds like little earthquake tremors to the AoE. And those are kind of like a poor man's version of the Run Like the Wind tornadoes, where they can continue to give you procs and critical hits and damages. It's not it's not as effective as just using Sprint Run Like the Wind, but it seems like that might be somewhat viable. You hit into a big pack and you get 50 hit checks really quick.
Would you use the next rune up? It will reduce the Fury by 15. That's the rune that I equipped it with it when I was using it. And then I tried some other ones, and I really like the reduced Fury cost because you can kind of spam it a little bit and destroy entire groups.
But if you had Rumble and you were proccing 20 critical hits and you were using the other passives that give you that bonus, I mean the Warcry one, that I would essentially refill you. I mean that's why it's. But then there are better skills than Seismic Slam in any event. But unless you just really like Seismic Slamming. You can make an Earthbender Barbarian using Seismic Slam and Earthquake all the time or something. If there were variants in Diablo III, which there aren't. How about Ancient Sphere? Either of you guys ever use Ancient Sphere for any purpose, reason, or
actually just thinking that. I was going through and I'm like, what skills would I never use and have I never used? Ancient Sphere is one of them. I mean, like, okay, I can hit one person and bring it. I don't know. It just never appealed to me. That and like Weapon Throw, I've never used either.
Oh, you're missing out on Weapon Throw. Have you ever used Ancient Sphere, Sarnakle?
No, I have high hope.
Not even to experiment with it.
Just to experiment with it for about 3 monsters or so, and then I just got bored with it and changed it. I think that it could be effective in PvP, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of it is PvP. I mean, the Butcher uses it pretty damn well.
But he's got like 5 of them.
Well, there's an option to use 3.
Yeah, but that's not 5.
But the Butcher's is weird because his Ancient Spear is just a hit, and then he throws a hook separately as his grab, whereas your Ancient Spear is the hook. So it's. But yeah, I think that'll be. Yeah, that was actually on the PvP build at BlizzCon in 2010, and it was awesomely fun to try to use. It was really hard to hit anybody with just one of them because everybody was moving around and stuff. But you can just imagine that just yank some guy out of his diamond skin. It's like, come here. And of course, you get to make the Mortal Kombat sound effect when you use it.
I think it would be more effective to like pair in PvP to pair like Leap and Furious Charge, as opposed and like just chase after them as opposed to dragging them to you, because I think you would miss all the time with Ancient Spear.
Yeah, it's a cute concept. Have you seen that you could use it to cheap your way through Tyrael? I mean, Yuzul earlier.
Yeah, I saw that.
You could get him stuck on one of those circles when he was trying to grind on Tyrael, and you could just stand across it and just poke him with 1,000 Ancient Spears. Incredibly boring, but it was possible.
Crip used it on his world first hardcore clear. I saw him using it a couple of times. I have no idea. I mean, I saw him do it. That was about it. I'm bringing up the. It could have been maybe to get life. I don't know.
It does have a good.
And maybe to catch like a Morlu caster or something.
Maybe. I don't know what he had.
I mean, to pull in a ranged attacker that's running, I guess, is the theory. But it's so easy to go to the ranged attacker with Leap or Furious Charge or whatever. What's the point?
The way their setup worked was there was a wizard that was doing most of the damage, and he was the tank. So he was basically responsible for chasing Azul around, or having Azul chase him around.
How about defensive stuff? Ground Stomp, Leap? Ignore pain?
From my perspective,
What do you guys
I
like?
think leap is possibly one of the most valuable. Just things are getting tight, and you can't, finish out what's in front of you. You can get the fuck out of there real quick.
Do you use the one that raises your defense? Or like, is it defense or is it debuff monsters? I forget.
Raises your defense by 300%.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. So when I land, if I'm still going to get hit, I'm going to take a lot less damage. And you can kind of go back and recoup and maybe go back in and take things out. I never use it to like start a battle or anything. I always like to have it just kind of there, not on cooldown, so I can. Yeah,
it's your escape
basically, I think it's my favorite escape, and it's fun to see. So there's that too.
Well, then other thing about it too is it like works right now. Like it seems certain skills you can tap it and it doesn't work quite right away, but like as soon as you hit leap, you go right now, and then you're out of there. So if it's an emergency situation, it's very useful.
The only thing to note is if you don't choose the right target, you can get yourself killed. I had that happen in the beta. I leapt to the wrong point and was overwhelmed. So, I mean, you got to think about, look before you leap, I guess, would be. Yep.
How
about Ground Stomp?
Ground Stomp, I think, is actually a very effective low-level defensive skill. Because you sit there, you Ground Stomp, you can stun everything, and I like Cleave, so if I'm surrounded by monsters, they just sit there and blow up with Rupture over and over. Yeah,
the one Ground Stomp rune effect that pulls stuff into you, I thought paired really nicely with Cleave.
That's one I use quite. I think I use that usually until I'm in my 20s.
Especially if you get like a bunch of skeletons or something weak or fallen, and you pull like 10 of them in at once, and it's just blam, hey, you're all dead now.
I think in Sarnakle, I hate to cut in, I think you drew on something that's really sad about the barbarian classes. I feel like you outgrow certain skills. Like as you get higher up in levels, and that they're just those skills that were so essential, in you coming up that you just kind of abandon, and Ground Stomp is one of them. Mm-hmm. You start out and it's just like, oh, this is awesome. Like I can totally use this, and then you hit 20, you hit 30, and you're just like, I'll take something else.
Yeah.
If there's no way to make it spammable, I mean, you can't reduce the cooldown with other stuff, which kind of is. I mean, if you could do it every 5 seconds, then. Have you ever played with like 4 other barbs and just taken turns? In theory, it's a 3-second stun. You could just go in a circle and nothing can ever move.
You can toss the bash with the rune and then Ground Stomp and just just try and stun the bosses as often as you can. And I think for a boss fight, it works really well. I don't know about like going through and clearing Inferno, but for a boss fight, I would do that in the early levels. But I think after 20 or 30, you're more concerned about putting out as much damage as possible, and then you kind of forget about the stuns.
Okay, the weirdest barbarian skill that doesn't look or sound or smell right is Overpower. Do you guys care for that one?
Can't stand it. Never use it.
And it looks like a Nova kind of effect. Like, you're casting a spell, but it has like buff effects. It doesn't really do anything to the monsters. It just seems really strange. And it has like almost no visual. I was thinking of that when you guys talking earlier about how awesome some of the smashing, blood, explosion, etc. I think you actually said, Xanth, the overpowering visuals. I'm like, he actually has a skill called Overpower that has no visuals.
To be honest, I played around with it a couple of times, but it's never made its way fully onto a build for me. Like, just try it out in town. I'm just like, no, not for me, and I never use it.
It's got a really effective healing effect, too. I would think you'd find that useful.
Right, it's at 50.
The level 59 Revel, 8% of your max life for every enemy hit. And you can easily get, 10 enemies and, hey, 80% heal. I mean, that's 50,000 hit points.
And
sometimes.
Yet, it never makes its way. And I very rarely see any builds with it, either.
Mm-mm.
And it's got a 15-second cooldown. There's one of them that adds critical hit chance by 10% for 6 seconds. I mean, if there was a way to shorten the cooldown, that would become like a mandatory skill. It's a 10% you would just be like a buff that you'd always keep on. But it just seems like I use Overpower at level 60. The reveal one's pretty good, but it's just not fun. It's like somehow it's unsatisfying, and I'm not sure if it's the visual or the lack of a graphic with it or the sound effect, or it's just funny that it's the most powerful sounding skill, and then it's just unsatisfying in function.
Yeah.
I guess we all agree on that.
All right. Well, overpowered stuff.
Okay, how about the shouts? Threatening Shout, Battle Rage, Warcry. Some of these are mandatory for certain builds. If you're kind of going with the defensive one, it seems like Warcry is pretty good. The highest level one gives you 50% resistance bonuses, which is gigantic, and there's other ones along the way. Which ones have you guys used?
I've used the one with resistance, and I think it's the best by my opinion, which counts for something, I guess. But being able to boost, go from 300 to 500 or whatever it happens to be. I'm not a math man, but increasing your resistances, especially for the hardcore set. Any slot of gear with resistance on it is already expensive, and just being able to kind of boost your resistance and start farming can save a little bit on your gold, and then also still be effective. That's a win-win in my book, and then also not die.
And that's Warcry Impunity, which is level 60. So obviously a pretty in-game option there. I found a lot of benefit from... God, which one is the one that increases that? Warcry increases your hit points. Invigorate, I think it is. Yeah, 10% max life and gives you a big-ass life regen, and it's only level 41. So like if you're in Nightmare or Hell, you don't have much life regen yet. That one's really nice.
That's the one that I used with my Barbarian. I used that, and I combined it with Threatening Shout, because that way you get 10% more life, and you reduce the damage of enemies, essentially giving yourself like 30% more hit points, sort of. But I think that Impunity, if you hit level 60, is just... Those resistances just outweigh the 10% life bonus, and even the regen.
The most common one, I think, though, is Battle Rage, the Into the Fray, which is what's required for a number of builds, where that gives you 15% Fury for uncritical hits, a chance of scoring. And there's a number of builds where we'll talk about those in a minute, but you need basically infinite Fury to keep using these really high-level skills. And that certainly provides it. Or that enables you to stay in the Wrath of the Berserker form indefinitely. Because every time you gain, you pair that with the rune in Wrath of the Berserker, that gives you another second of duration every 25 Fury. And Into the Fray is giving you 15 Fury for almost every crit. Hey, I'm going to be a super side-in mode forever, right?
Right. I mean, I like the skill, just the base skill in general. I mean, being able to increase your damage and your crit hit chance. And, going for 30 seconds. I always feel more effective when that's up, for obvious reasons. And then, you toss it Into the Fray and just all the possibilities that end up opening up as a result. I think that's when the Barbarian really gets to be fun. I had fun on my Barbarian before the Whirlwind build kind of became popular, but I had a hell of a lot more once I was able to kind of play around with that.
And the ugly red-headed stepchild, Step Mule, is Threatening Shout, which gives you defensive bonuses and not much else. And that's more of a debuff of monsters kind of effects on most of them. But it seems to pale besides the bonuses from Battle Rage or Warcry.
Even if you look at some of the runes for Threatening Shout, you look at Grim Harvest. Enemies are badly shaken, have a 15% chance to drop a general treasure. When you're still getting level 55 items in Inferno, does it matter if you get 15% more of them? Probably not. It just seems like a great concept, in terms of a skill, but it just doesn't feel like that was executed well enough.
Like you look at Terrify, which is the level 57 rune effect in Threatening Shout, and it gives you a 35% chance of making any monster flee for 2.5 seconds, which sounds awesome. But then once you're that high level, you don't care about making anything regular flee. Trash mobs are what you want to come towards you. It's like, please, give me more health points, give me more fury. The only thing you care about scaring is bosses, and that they're like
and I've always
crap
found,
anyway.
too, that anything that seems to be running away it's always the thing that runs away. I'll have a weapon or something that has like a 1% fear chance or whatever it may be. It'll proc, I'll make something run away, and then all of a sudden it's coming back with a huge heap of stuff that I did not want any part of.
And since we're kind of getting into this, critical hits, kind of the core of how barbarians work. And you need lots of, these higher level builds require like 35, 40, 45% critical hit chance. And you can get a fair amount from some of his passives and his other skills, but you really need equipment, and that's where it gets expensive, where you have to go shopping for lots and lots of critical hit chance. Is that what you guys have done with your barbs?
It does get expensive. I mean, when my Barbarian was hitting 60, I had been pooling, a set of gear aside from stuff that I had farmed. So it was a little bit cheaper. But, you can go onto the auction house and take a look, and you throw in crit, and you throw in some strength, and you're going to be seeing prices that are probably going to wipe out most of your average hardcore characters' bank accounts. And, it might just be one set of shoulders, and then they're broke. So it is really expensive because it is a really popular build, and we're dealing with, probably one of the most popular hardcore classes. Now, I can't say the same for softcore, but I assume it is. I assume those bits of gear that would cater to this build, especially since you can see how effective it is, are insanely more expensive.
And everybody wants critical. I mean, like the main sorcerer, the main wizard build now, the most popular one is where you need lots of crits to keep your cooldowns getting procced. And obviously you're not going to want exactly the same gear. You're not going to want plus strength on a wizard kind of thing. But there's ring. I'm sure you could envision rings or amulets or other items that would have say it just has like, vitality, res all, and critical hit chance.
Right.
Every class wants that.
The one advantage I think a Barbarian has in terms of getting this gear is they are the only strength-based class, as opposed to a wizard and a witch doctor will be fighting over intelligence, and a monk and a demon hunter will be fighting over dexterity. Anything with strength and crit is immediately a barb. Nobody else is going to really put a value into it.
Yeah, but like you said, it's the most popular class, so then there's more people looking for that strength gear.
Right, and that's
or at least it averages out maybe a little bit.
Right, I think it still averages more as a negative towards a Barbarian because there are so many of them.
And you wonder how much of that, which way that feedback loop runs. Are there more barbs because there's no one else wanting strength because it's easier to get the gear, or are there more people playing barbs because it's easier to get the gear that has the strength? Say that 3 times fast. I can't even say it 1 time fast. Okay, so the biggest thing we mentioned earlier, but Battle Rage is the effect, is the skill, which is a shout, and it gives you a 30-second duration, which adds to your damage and your critical hit chance, and Into the Fray grants a chance to gain 15 fury when you score critical hits under this effect. And that's kind of the mandatory skill for a number of builds, unless you're going with the War Cry, which gives you the huge resistance bonus we mentioned earlier. And, of course, the trick to that is not to stand there and use Cleave over and over again, although I guess that might work maybe, but you want to pair it with skills to give you chances to hit lots and lots of things quickly. And the most popular one is Sprint with Run Like the Wind, which casts little tornado thingies that give lots of AoE checks on monsters in large groups. And that's kind of what your build, he said, is, Xanth. And Whirlwind is also useful, but Whirlwind is ironically useful not in of itself as much as it enables you to move through things. And you continue to cast the Sprint, Run Like the Wind tornadoes while you're doing it. Now that I've totally explained that, would you care to explain this? Now that I've stolen all your thunder.
I don't know necessarily if there is much. I mean, basically, you want to build, as you had said, round up a group of monsters, lead them into your tornadoes, make sure your Battle Rage is going, throw up Wrath of Berserker, Thrive on Chaos, and then, go back, Whirlwind, and put out more tornadoes. The more monsters you have there, the more times you're critting, the longer everything's going to last, and eventually everything dies, and you collect your loot and win.
You mentioned, Sarnakle, you can also do that with Furious Charge. It will it will maintain the sprint speed bonus and the tornado bonuses. Why do you suppose Whirlwind is more popular, generally speaking? I guess if you miss with the Furious Charge, you can't do it again for 12 seconds.
Yeah,
that's
definitely
the problem.
An issue, and it does happen. I think that, Whirlwind is just, you're doing a lot more damage. What is the rune that you usually use with Whirlwind? Because I actually have never used it, except for last night.
For the one that I would do with my build, I liked Hurricane because you would keep your movement speed and it would keep things moving a little bit quicker. You can, have the one where you're gaining life if you're kind of worried about your health, or you could do the one where you're gaining 1 fury for every enemy you hit, but you're already gaining so much fury from everything else that one
Right.
kind of doesn't seem as important. So, you can go with the movement speed to keep things going a little bit quicker, or you could do the one where you're getting, 1% of your life for each critical hit.
Mm-hmm. And then when you add attack speed, it obviously you hit more often with Whirlwind. Is that correct?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I would believe so.
I think that's how it was in D2. I don't know if it's still the same way in D3, but I think as you added attack speed, you would, every couple pings or whatever they call them, you would hit more often. But
The attack speed, the biggest bonus from attack speed is it makes your little whirlwind tornadoes
is that
hit
what
check
it is?
more often. There's a bunch of stuff with, if you want to, the build for that now mainly, maybe not so much in hardcore, but people want to dual wield when they're doing this build with the whirlwind and the sprint. And you want your second weapon to be something really fast, like a dagger is what people often use. And you definitely need life on hit, which we've probably mentioned already. But you also need, so really people are getting like 450 damage daggers that have like 700 life on hit and really fast attack rates. And that is what because you don't really care about the damage as much, you just want to keep getting the hit checks going, so you keep getting more crits, so you can keep your fury up. Oh yeah, Whirlwind alternates the damage from dual wielding. So if you have an 800 and a 600 weapon or whatever, it's taking turns. Sprint and Overpower only check the main hand weapon. So Sprint, all that matters is your main hand one, but apparently the speed of it is also checked by the second weapon. So there's all kinds of long, complicated arguments in the forum threads I was reading yesterday about if you want to dual wield and if it's better to just use a really big damage for some skills because it doesn't, the procs don't check on the attack speed as much.
Yeah.
So it gets complicated, basically. So the question I had about the sprint and the whirlwind build, do you think that Blizzard meant sprint, run like the wind to be the most important skill in the entire game for Barbarians? I mean, if you just read the description of it, it seems like, sprint is a 3-second, 40% speed run. It sounds like almost like an escape skill. Like you would just use this to get the hell out of dodge if your ass is in trouble, or occasionally to move between stuff, like almost like a charge kind of skill. It seemed like. Of course, you've got furious charge.
I think the original intent with the tornadoes trailing behind you was, if they were close to dying and you were close to dying, that you would run out and they would get killed chasing you.
It seems like a novelty almost, and it's become this. People have found ways to get all these procs and criticals, and do it forever.
I say, kudos to them if they can find something like that with, the Witch Doctor's huge toad. I would love to hear it. I wish that there were all these really cool builds with, these synergies off of these small minor skills. I feel like that would make, shake things up a little bit. I feel like with a Barbarian, you do have a little bit of diversity, and yeah, a lot of people are doing the Whirlwind build now, but, that'd be great if every class kind of had that. It feels like you don't have that with a lot.
I mean, Wizards, that's one of the real popular builds, where you get the Frost Nova and the Tornadoes. Everyone thought Energy Twister was the worst skill in the game. And then it's good because of the exact same reason as this Sprint skill. Because it gives you tons and tons of hit checks, and you can use critical hit chance to lower all your cooldowns because of that. And I'm just really wondering, are the two best builds in the game a complete accident that Blizzard never foresaw, that people have only found out ways to do it by combining multiple skills? Or did they cleverly include this all along? And if so, how come we don't have them for Demon Hunters and Monks?
I'm going to venture that it was not something they intended. I mean, you look at some of the things that have cropped up. You look at the Barbarian bug, the Wizard bug, and stuff like that. I feel like, as we mentioned before, that it was a novelty skill, something that, get people out of trouble kind of thing. And people have found a way to exploit it. It's kind of like the Endgame. They didn't think it all the way through, and we end up with the problems that we have now. They didn't expect their player base to be playing as much or to plow through the content as quickly. And as a result, now we get some of these builds where people have really been doing the intense testing that they probably never did.
and found ways to combine equipment and critical
Right.
enchants and such. And it's funny because that's the good thing. You know, I always figured that a lot of the stuff that really was fun in Diablo 2 was kind of the same way. Like, it was unintended consequences of
Right.
combinations. And it's like, oh, you can use this and this and this together, and it's really awesome. It's like, oh, who knew? I guess that's just what happens with these games. You put in so many features, and you can't possibly test everything with your,
Right.
your QA department. And you just hope that there's some fun stuff that works out that's not wildly overpowered or unbalanced.
And, I mean, I don't
Sorry,
feel
go
like
ahead,
this is a game-breaking build either. Is it effective? Yeah. Do people still die with it? I mean, from the hardcore perspective, yeah. It's not like this is something that immediately face rolls everything. You have to put a lot of thought into it. You have to put a lot of work into getting that gear. And granted, you can take out your credit card for the softcore folks. But it still doesn't feel like game-breaking. I still feel like people are playing other classes. It's not like, oh, you immediately need to play a barbarian because it's the only way you can win at this game.
Do you ever use Ignore Pain in any of your Barb builds?
I did, and I would. I mean, obviously when I was running the Whirlwind, I wouldn't. But when I was before the Whirlwind, I did. I liked it. I mean, obviously reducing a lot of damage. It's another one of those oh shit buttons, much like Leap. I felt like Ignore Pain was something I could, throw down when I felt like I could get through something. I just needed a little help. Whereas Leap was more for, this is a situation I cannot win, and I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ignore Pain is kind of a diamond skin for the Barb, kind of. It's 30 seconds. From it's got a really long cooldown, so it reduces all damage by 65% for 5 seconds. And none of the rune effects really change the function.
Right.
They just kind of add a little better. You can make it heal you, or you can increase the duration. You can add a knockback. God, I didn't know that existed. That's when it's activated. But there's no way to cut duration to to 10 seconds or whatever. So I was using that for a while with my Barb, and it was great if I was really in trouble. You can use the one that heals you a little bit when the damage is taken. But then you've got 25 seconds of waiting for it.
But it's not, I mean, I guess I've never found a situation where I really had to use it more often than that. It's like if I have to use it more often than 25 seconds, then I use my escape skill and I just get away from that fight altogether.
Yeah, it seems like with a barbarian, if in that duration of 5 or whatever, how many seconds it happens to be, I think you can buff it up to 7. If you're not okay by the end of those 7 seconds, you're probably screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah, those of you who play hardcore and have responsible gear choices are probably an issue. But there's lots of times I could have used 20 seconds out of that thing with my softcore Barb. I'm still dead. Or I could have used a lot more than 65% too. But so speaking of skills that should be but aren't, Call of the Ancients.
I love that skill.
Like, everyone's like, this should be so awesome. You can get back the 3 unpronounceable guys from Diablo 2 and they'll kick ass for you. But have you ever found a build you can really fit it into? I mean, it's totally novelty and awesome.
Sarnakle, you were using it the other night, I saw.
Yeah, I'm using it right now because I have a low enough character that I can use it and still survive. But definitely once you get into higher builds, it's just it's novelty, just like you said. Right now, it's actually quite effective when you're in normal, or maybe even halfway through Nightmare, it might be still pretty good because they attack pretty fast and they do a decent amount of damage. But then after a while, it's just it can't substitute Wrath of the Berserker or even Earthquake.
Right. I mean, even when you look at the runes too, they don't do anything better. Like, you can increase the duration to 20 seconds, and then you have Korlik and Madwick and Talix specific runes that only improve that one ancient. So Korlik will do Furious Charge, Madwick will do a Second Slam, Talix will do a Leap, and that's cool. But I have to rune just so Korlik can do a little more damage. That seems like a waste to me. And it was one of those skills that when we were looking at the beta and we never got to try it because they didn't have it in, it was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and they're gonna be like, kind of like I thought it would be more like the Monk's Mystic Ally, where you would have them fighting alongside you, maybe for not obviously permanent like the ally, but for at least more than what they are, 15 seconds is nothing.
Well, it's like I said, at low levels, it's enough to get you through a champion pack or an elite.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, once you get in those higher levels, they have no use.
Right.
And that's such a.
So what if one of the runes added like all 3 of the bonus properties, and then you had two more runes? What would you want them to be? I mean, like a life leech and a lower duration, something.
Like maybe treat them like a pet. Treat them like the witch doctor zombie dogs, the way they are now, where they can die. Not necessarily quickly, but they can die. And have them out there and usable for longer than 20 seconds. Make it a minute, make it 2 minutes. I don't care, but if they were able to stick around longer, I think you would see more people using them. But you don't need a rune for each particular character to do one thing.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting you note that. I noticed that the very first rune increases their armor by 100%, but I've never seen one die. Just like you said, if they could be killed, I don't think that they... I mean, obviously they can be killed if you can increase their armor, but it just seems kind of weird that they would... You can only summon them for 15 seconds, but they can still be killed. I don't think the fetish is for the Witch Doctor. Can they be targeted?
To be honest, I summon them all the time, and I never really looked.
Probably not, then. If you summon them against Diablo, does he kill them all in 1 second with a firebomb or something?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I mean...
No, I don't think they have.
Well, the initial version of the Council Rises skill actually increased their typing speed for 15%. So this is actually better, even though it's still useless.
It's,
One other high-level skill I've not gotten much use out of that I think should be awesome is Earthquake. And have you guys found ways to use this
I've
commonly?
always thought it was great during boss fights or, champion pack. It's got such a long cooldown that, it's awesome. Use it.
And it looks awesome, too. I mean, some of the move effects are just killer.
It's great, but sadly, it just takes way too long. I mean, I would rather have, something that was usable, like an Ignore Pain where the cooldown is 30 seconds is going to keep me alive, as opposed to Earthquake where I'm going to do a shit ton of damage, but then I'm going to wait for another, 2 minutes.
No,
So Earthquake, for people who haven't used it, it's a big AoE effect under your feet. It looks like fire or lava or rocks exploding, and it's 50 fury in 8 seconds, deals 2,000% weapon damage over 8 seconds. That's gonna be the biggest number of any damage in the game, isn't it? And you look at the hover, you're like, wait, is that 200%? Oh my god, 2,000%! And then you use it once, and then you wait 2 minutes to cast it again, which is pretty much the problem.
Well, I noticed in the article that you just released, Xanth, I forget the name of the guy in that article, but he was
AlexanderBaron.
Yeah, Baron. He was mixing Wrath of the Berserker with Earthquake, and he was just annihilating champion packs. Now, like you said, you have a massive cooldown on that. But I mean, he was just destroying things when he was using it. So I think it has some use. I've found this skill to be useful myself. But it does.
What do you guys think would be? What if you had 7 hotkeys or 8 hotkeys on your Barbarian? Would you tack on, Wrath of the Berserker? I mean, would you tack on Earthquake and Call of the Ancients and stuff? Just, situational cool stuff, or would you just add, 2 more debuffs?
I would go more offense. I feel like especially.
So you'd still never use the cool stuff. You'd be practical.
I think so. I mean, I think from the hardcore standpoint, obviously, you do want to stay alive. But yeah, I mean, with an extra skill here and there, maybe tack on something something like an Earthquake wouldn't be the worst thing.
Yeah, I agree completely. I would definitely probably use a few more offensive skills rather than defensive skills. Never, ever would I put Call of the Ancients as part of my high-level build, but Earthquake, I think, would be essential to if I had 7 hotkeys, I think I would mix that with Wrath of the Berserker.
You just reminded me, you mentioned Weapon Throw earlier. You said you'd never used it, Sam.
I didn't particularly care for it.
You get Ricochet at level 25, which enables your axe to bounce up to 3 targets. And I found that really useful against, like, desert wasps, stuff like that. When you're first in Act 2 and you're weak and you can't really run stuff down very well. That or, like, seismic slam kind of thing, where you don't really have any other ranged attacks if stuff hurts too much to get close to. And it throws really fast. It throws a huge axe really fast. And I did once get a, missile dampening boss when I had weapon throw ready. And that was just so fun, just to see, like, 70 axes floating in the air. Completely useless, because it's a pretty heavy fury cost. So, but that reminds me, the question I was going to ask you guys, do you wish there were some variance and some more variety? I mean, there's not a horrible lack of variety in barbarians, not like witch doctors or anything, but do you wish there were more, obviously there's not really any ranged weapons in Diablo 3, but do you wish you could play more like war cries that were attack skills, or what would you want to add variety to this class? Better weapon throw
I was just going to say,
like
we have a skill called weapon throw, but you don't have a throw barb. I mean, I remember their popularity in Diablo 2 where, you wanted the awesome spears so you could go around, chucking things left and right.
Well, we don't have any throwing weapons in Diablo 3, so it's tough.
That kind of, I felt like the Diablo 2 Barbarian, and I mean, you could say that with any class, but had such a diversity. I mean, you were a sword barb, you were, a polearm barb, or you were, a throw barb, or something else. And they
had singer barbs that used war cries, because you could actually deal damage with war cries, whereas all the war cries in D3 are buffs and debuffs.
They're marginal. I mean, there are some great buffs, do not get me wrong, but again, going back to our previous conversation, it never feels like, when a barbarian's there that you're being helped immensely by them throwing a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, he needs it to keep himself alive, but it doesn't really do anything for anybody else.
I think that brings up the perfect point is that barbarian is shouting and increasing your resistances too, which is great, but you were already geared with enough resistances to take out what you needed. Whereas, in Diablo 2, it was just making you better. Here,
that may be less true in softcore than in hardcore.
That's probably true, and that comes from my mindset, obviously. But usually I'm showing up to a game geared to the level that I need to be, and anybody who's buffing me is just going to, increase it a little bit, but it's nothing I couldn't have handled before.
Any variant thoughts for you, Sarnakle?
I agree. I was actually going to say the war cry thing, that you just felt really Barb was really useful in Diablo 2 and to your party, and they're not right now. I was actually surprised to the variety that they brought with the Barbarian. When they first announced that they were bringing back the Barbarian, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, it's just going to be a boring class. Because it was actually my least favorite class in Diablo 2. It's just, you basically, you have a couple variants, but, I mean, you basically run up and bash things, but they just made it so much more fun. But there's just there's a lot of things that the Barbarian can do in Diablo 3 with Earthquake and Wrath of the Berserker, and I'm actually pretty satisfied with the class as a solo entity, I guess.
Forever a Barb. 104 is coming up soon, TM, as Blizzard says it, which means between now and never. What are you guys hoping to see for the Barb?
In looking at each class, I don't know what would really necessarily need to be fixed about the Barbarian. I mean, maybe, as we've kind of discussed over the course of this, some skill tweaks and maybe improving a couple of skills here and there, make Call of the Ancients cool. I think gear itself and, making legendary items legendary again, I feel like that would do a lot for this class. All of a sudden, I really, really want to be able to use, a sword like Grandfather on a Barbarian and have it be awesome. I actually went out to the auction house and bought a Grandfather to use on my Barbarian, even though I knew it was going to suck. Love to see in 1.04 two-hand items become really viable, and I can't speak for softcore because I don't play it, but I mean in hardcore you don't use one because it's so much more effective to have a shield and a one-hand, but to have an actual two-handed weapon that feels right would be great.
It seems like softcore is almost all dual-wielding now. because you get so much more hit checks on the procs with a fast second weapon.
Interesting.
And it makes two-hand... I mean, we had endless debates before Diablo. I mean, back like in 2008, we were debating forever, how do you make two-handed weapons more viable? Because we had the exact same thing in Diablo 2, where it was never better to use a two-handed than it was to use a sword shield. Or especially with like spellcasters. I mean, no one ever used a staff as a sorceress. It was always better off to use an Oculus and an orb or something like that. And of course, now in D2 we have these offhand weapons that give you more bonus. So even then, the Barb doesn't have those, but everyone else, Wizard, Demon Hunter, etc., all use quivers and stuff like that. And two-handed weapons just seem like they're completely useless. And people are always saying, like, maybe they could have, like, inherent bonuses to defense or inherent bonuses to blocking or, something that would make up the ground between what you had and what you didn't. And so if your grandfather was to be buffed, this is the sword, not your actual relative. If it was the new 104 version of the grandfather, what does it need that you could use it in hardcore without it being just wildly overpowered?
I think better stats. I mean, it needs to compensate for whatever you wouldn't have in that second hand.
Well, mainly you have a shield in your second hand, though. So, I mean, you're talking about like defensive bonus. Like, what if it had plus 500 vitality?
Something, comparable. I mean, hell, toss on some armor. Is anybody going to argue with the fact that you could block with a two-handed sword? Probably not. Exactly.
Magic. You can do what you want.
I mean, we're dealing with a fantasy world. We can argue anything. Something like that where it can balance out what you wouldn't have. Or you could go the other route and allow them to dual-wield two-handed weapons.
Definitely want to have an axe in hardcore, an axe-wielding, two-handed axe-wielding barbarian. It just feels right to have a barbarian with a two-handed weapon. Something like I prefer an axe over the grandfather. But I think I think that needs to be done through the items, just like we were talking about it. It's not necessarily the skills that the barbarian has available to him. It's the items that he has available to him to allow him to do that. Because on hardcore, if you don't have a shield in Inferno, you'd probably just get annihilated immediately.
A lot of our talks about the skills that needed changes were cooldowns that are too long. Iron Skin and Ground Stomp and other stuff we were mentioning. Mm-hmm. Earthquake, certainly. So maybe that could be something we might see on some of the legendaries that actually were legendary. It had 25% reduced to cooldowns or something like that.
They have stuff like that on weapons, but it's so marginal that it doesn't even matter. Like,
it's 0.1 second.
Or I've seen with Zombie Bears for Witch Doctor reduce the mana cost by 9. Okay, so that makes no difference at all. So I would love to see stuff like that. Like you had said, Flux reducing it by 25%. That would be huge, and those would be items that people would want and would be searching for, because you would become more effective by having those kind of affixes as opposed to just a base strength or crit.
And it would enable game-changing build differences, which is what we really want. You don't want your Whirlwind to be 5% better. You want to be able to use, Ground Stomp as your main debuff because it's only got a 5-second cooldown.
Now, really, without being able to add skill points to skills, I mean, synergies really wouldn't be effective in Diablo 3, I don't think.
Well, we have synergies that aren't really synergies. I mean, like you have to use certain skills with other skills. Like we were just saying with Warcry. You have to have that certain rune effect to give you the chance to keep building your Fury so you can use other stuff. But so it's a synergy by another name. But yeah, go ahead.
No, that was my point.
Oh, well, I stole from you again.
I think...
See, I had too much caffeine today, so I'm jumping all over the points.
You do seem a little jumpy today, Flux.
Just definitely need that item improvement. Witch Doctor needs some improvement majorly.
So the other question for upcoming changes is the PvP will be enabled at some point. And have you guys had thoughts about PvP barbarians?
I have.
Go first this time, Sarnakle.
I'm definitely going to be focusing on movement speed and being able to stay on top of all the ranged characters. Because that's obviously the biggest downfall of Barbarian is he's slow. So Frenzy is going to be your must for your primary.
Are you sure? Because you'll never get 5 hits in order to charge it up.
You think?
It was hard to get one hit
Okay,
in a row
so
when I played
you have
with
an advantage.
BlizzCon,
I've never played it. This is just mere theory crafting.
Well, imagine you're playing someone else who actually knows what they're doing and is moving quickly. Are you ever going to get 5 hits in 3 seconds?
This is
they'll
the
be
thing
dead in 2, right?
that I wanted to get to. Frenzy has Vanguard, which increases your movement speed by 15%. Now, if you mix that with Sprint and already have like 25% movement speed from your gear, you would maybe essentially be able to keep up with them and at least eventually get those hits in, maybe. The other thing I was thinking of is pairing it with Leap and Furious Charge, where they both have cooldowns, but you can use one while the other one's in cooldown, and maybe even Ancient Spear if I'm running into a big problem with not being able to spam the two of them. Well, not spam them, but use them consecutively to stay on top of wizards or demon hunters. So that's my thought, is just testing that out, is increasing my movement speed so that I can keep on top of them.
Anything for you, Xanth, or do you have what you're still going?
That's pretty much my build.
I haven't, to be honest, really thought too much about PvP because I'm not really expecting it anytime soon. Well, right.
Like the Spanish Inquisition.
All of a sudden it's tomorrow. No, it won't happen. Yeah, I haven't been thinking too much about PvP. It's one of those things. I think you have an advantage, Flux. You've tried it and you know of it. I'm just trying to kind of go with the flow with what we have now. But I will definitely say that I've kind of been looking forward to just gearing up as many characters as I can. So when PvP does open up, when you get that influx of people who quit, 2-3 weeks ago and they come back and they want a PvP, I'm going to be geared enough to just kind of take them out.
And you guys are, I'm assuming, hoping that we will get some sort of duel mode or training mode or practice mode, and it won't be one fight and you're dead forever in hardcore PvP, because that would be
right, especially when you're
unused.
dealing with a team aspect too, where some DCs and now you're going to die as a result of it. Yeah, I don't particularly care for it, and we've talked about this before, Flux, too, that you're going to run through your population who want to use the arena in a day, maybe 2 days, and then you have to go through the vigorous process of leveling back up over and over again.
Well, it'd be finally be a reason to reroll
True.
other than hardcore.
And it might help me sell a couple of things on the auction house, but I think it would discourage more people than it would anything else.
What about optional one-on-one permanent death, fight to the death type of match?
I think that would work.
Yeah, a Highlander mode,
like an option in game or across somebody you're friends with or something that you could actually duel them, something like that. But I don't know, just jumping into a random game and one-on-one for keeps. I don't know.
I would.
What if you're betting all your gear?
To be honest, I would like to see, because at least then you get something for winning, or. But I don't know. I really do not like that concept of somebody just randomly showing up and dying for no reason. I don't know.
What if it was team? We had this whole debate forever ago, before release, when they finally admitted that they were going to do PvP and have it be a reasonable synth that you could play more than once. Like if it was team best of 7 or something, but that was before we even had the deathmatch version. So first team to 20 kills wins. Everybody else dies forever.
If you choose the people that you're going in there with, but you're still relying on people that are not you, and you might be properly geared to destroy the entire rest of the team one-on-one, but then you die because of your team, and then you die forever because of that.
I think in this and talking about the barbarian and skills and all that stuff, I really want to point to an awesome guide that was written by AlexanderBaron, and I had in my column last week. I'm going to be bumping it up this week as well, and then it's still on the site under one of the tabs. In terms of depth and just awesome information about getting a barbarian and completing Inferno and Hardcore, I consider it a must-read. Not only does it have information, but it has videos, and if you really want to take a barbarian to the next level, in hardcore or even in softcore, you should definitely check it out.
I've read
plug.
that. That is actually a really good article.
Okay, guys, that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Diablo Podcast. We are online at diablopodcast.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Boo.
Moo, moo, moo.
Boo.